Hey everybody! Today I am going to be reviewing SKINAMARINK. This film came out in 2022 and it is directed by Kyle Edward Ball. This is a film that wants to look very lo-fi. It's dabbling fairly boldly into like abstract concepts, experimental aspects of the horror genre, and the movie is mainly crowdfunded. Really, it cost something like $15,000 to make, and it kind of caught on in the festival circuit, but it was really the viral clips and a lot of the pirated versions of the film that kind of leaked out and was passed around online. That is how it got popular. At least that's where kind of the real world, general word of mouth started to come in. So naturally, it's been brought up to me multiple times in the last several months through you guys, through, like my patrons, through even people that I know in my personal life. So that naturally tickled my curiosity, but also I just noticed that it had a very split reaction, and naturally that intrigued me even further, just because some people either really, really dislike it and some think it's quite terrifying. But I do think that the background is very interesting to the film, because the director, Ball, he started in YouTube and developing short films and such based on a lot of his viewers' dreams, just kind of in the comment sections, I believe. So over time, I guess just reading about, different fans, different commenters, you start to see commonalities and you start to see recurring imagery of dreams that we all kind of share. We decided to make a movie about these universal dreams and a lot of this universal imagery that we all share just kind of in our subconscious. It's something that we can all relate to. So that's the idea. As I said, it is crowdfunded. I think they were using borrowed equipment for a lot of it, and it was shot in his childhood home with a lot of his own childhood toys and such. And I mentioned the lo-fi look, and this movie does have a very specific nostalgic look that looks very, late 1970s, early to mid 80s. And I don't know, I really like that about it. And, the film is very simple in style. And like I said, the lo-fi aesthetic is a big part of this. And the movie does have a quality to it that is very kind of late 70s, early to mid 1980s. And I think there are sections of the film that are really, really good when it comes to conveying the mood. And, because naturally the film is all about style in terms of what is driving it. And I think that this director is naturally very confident there. I do think there are sections of the film that are really strong in terms of really conveying the tone that they want to go for. And naturally this movie, what is driving it forward is the style to it. And I will say, for the director, at least he's confident. And so we have a film here where basically everything in it is implied. There's not a single face that is shown, directly and fully. This movie feels kind of like a montage of like pillow shots. A lot of off-kilter angles, and a lot of the images that we see, we can just barely decipher them in the darkness. But good Lord, I think just the gimmicks here of relying so heavily on implication, for me, it is a huge problem. And I will say, it wasn't always. I was actually quite on board with the movie, I would say maybe in the first 30 minutes of it, maybe. I feel like I got the gimmick, I got what the movie was doing, and I kind of admired it to a degree, and I can appreciate a good gimmick when it is exploited properly. But here it just feels like we are stretching the simplicity of this premise, I think, far too much. And yeah, the movie, y'all, it is an hour and 40 minutes, which may not seem long, but trust me, with this kind of movie, it is just a glacial pace. And a lot of times when you watch a movie, you can kind of feel the director's personality coming through it, whether you know the director or not. And in this particular instance, I kind of found it a little bit off-putting, just because the film feels very full of itself. I think it thinks it's a lot craftier and more interesting than it actually is. And to me, it starts to feel a little bit insulting, I think, when the abstractions feel like they are existing, simply to embody very hollow cliches, like, what I mentioned before, just this idea of universal dreams that we have as people. And I do think that's interesting, and it's an interesting idea for a movie. It's just, I think you've got to be really good in order to be able to make it work, because I think inherently you're limiting yourself, but kind of sticking to the broadness of that concept for a feature. For me, I just wanted something else. I wanted something else going on here that was, able to fill the dead space. Quite literally, please fill the dead space, because there is a lot of it within the frame. But yeah, I don't know. I was thinking a lot of the time, wouldn't it be more satisfying if we could kind of breathe new life into cliches that, like the idea of things go bump in the night, or, children turning off the lights right before bed, and that type of thing. I think a fun, very good example of that was last year's Barbarian. I think that movie really did do exactly what I said. It breathed life into kind of old cliches in a way that felt invigorating at times and a bit unexpected. But yeah, with SKINAMARINK, I just find the discussion of the avant-garde and all of that, the director's influences when he talks about like Maya Deren and Jacques Tati and whatever, I feel like it's a little bit of it's a little forced, it's a little bit of a masquerade. It just feels a little pretentious and lofty, especially when you look at the end result. And I just find with a lot of these art house directors in the press junkets and such, especially when they're young directors and they're maybe a little bit innocent. They feel the need to have to explain their work and all this stuff, even just for audiences to be able to understand it on a basic level. And I often find that that is a big problem, and it's kind of going in the wrong direction. It should be, in my opinion, the other way around. I like it when the filmmaker doesn't have to really say anything. He just kind of drops the work off, walks away, and then we get to kind of decide what it means for us. I just think inherently, if your explanations come from an external source, that just kind of defeats the purpose. I just think that's common sense personally. But yeah, when I think about Skinamarink, it is my new cure for insomnia movie. Now, I am a notorious insomniac. I have been my entire life, and people obviously who know me, know that. But yeah, you basically have to put me out with horse tranquilizers in order for me to sleep. So I never was like falling asleep in class. I never fall asleep in movies or anything like that. But there was always one that did it for me. And it was Star Trek: The Motion Picture, directed by the great Robert Wise. I didn't think that film could ever be dethroned, but we absolutely have a new winner. And I think that's why I was drawn initially to the first act of the movie, just because, as you guys know, I like movies where you can kind of drift to sleep and maybe you can wake up in the middle of the movie. You've missed a significant chunk of it, and yet it's completely okay. Somehow you can just kind of go along with it. A lot of my favorite movies all fall under that category. So, I can dig it when it's done well. And like I said, initially, I liked that in the movie, and I like the simplicity of it. I especially like, the kind of use of color and especially sound here. And I found myself intrigued by the way that we have to slowly piece together the narrative as audience members, whether it's like just through the image of like a corner of a door or, like image of like a child's feet, and you can only see it because of the flickering blue television light in the background. Those long dark hallways that just kind of disappear like an abyss, a lamp or a photograph, something like that. Just little pillow shots going on here. And there was kind of an artfulness, and believe it or not, I do think there is, a good amount of detail to kind of building that, threading the story together in that way. So it's becoming, slowly more cohesive. And again, the mood of it, I'm very drowsy. Even in the opening of the film, I'm feeling drowsy. There's something about, I think, just like a flickering light, a blue light of a television at night, and you're drifting to sleep to it. That is just a very calming thing. And the dream and the film itself, when they can kind of blend together, again, all of that is very cool. And as I find myself kind of drifting or trailing off, and especially visually, I'm kind of looking off into the dead space of things, just the smallest little keys, little nuggets of characters and such are kind of floating around in my mind. It's almost like you're experiencing something blindfolded. It's like you're having to piece together things in a very unique way. And the film's not going to be blatant. It's not going to give it to you straight. Again, it wants you to do some of the work there. And I found kind of the immersion of, especially, the first third of it to be kind of interesting at times. I almost feel that the movie would have worked better as a video game. Now, I think it needs to have a lot more going for it than this. It needs more going on. But yeah, I think it would have been more eerie, more haunting. But again, I just can't stress this enough. It feels like there's nothing driving this movie forward other than the mood of it. There's just no tread in the tires at all. And while I do think there is, certainly effort and detail that is put into each shot, especially the choreography of it, at the same time, the simplicity of it really does hinder it, as I mentioned. And it gets really frustrating, especially in the second half, because, like I said, the movie it's real pixelated and it's grainy, and there's a lot of blues with the flickering light of the TV and all of that. And yes, so naturally it's going to be creepy because it's dark, you can't see anything, so our lack of control is obviously going to give you maybe some anxiety if that's the type of viewer that you are. And the monotony of the flow and just the darkness of everything. Everything is so shrouded in darkness that I think we fall too deeply into the ambiguity. And I do think that there are a lot of filmmakers, especially art house filmmakers, who like to hide behind the idea of ambiguity as though it is some sort of deep thing. But I think in this instance, I think it's more an excuse because the film doesn't have a very sturdy backbone. I just wish that somebody had talked to this guy and said, I don't think that this needs to be a feature film, or if you're going to make it a feature film, please put more into it. This should have never been more than like 30 minutes, maybe an hour at most, but it's just there is too much filler, which again, it doesn't really build to anything, and there's no emotional resonance. So once we kind of hone in on our two main characters, these two little kids, it's like, I don't really care what happens to them at all. So many of these images are just static and lacking intention. There's no dimension or depth to anything here. There's just a sense of, with the movie, it's like maybe you're taking yourself too seriously to the point where you can't really see your own shortcomings, especially with the director and the way he likes to talk about all of his influences and such. And I don't know, I feel like academia is often a crutch, especially in the art house films where there's an element of self-awareness that is lost. He mentions in interviews, he's very interested in the connection between these universal dreams and his own childhood, because like I said, he shot the movie in his house, and he shot it with a lot of his own toys that he had growing up. And it's like, oh, that is very interesting. That's great. I didn't feel that at all in the movie. That made me even more frustrated because it's like, where was that? I didn't get a sense of your personality or anything that was personal to you in this project. But it feels like, this movie feels like an Ozu film, but like without the actual scenes. It's just the connecting shots in between. And actually, when I thought about this movie, I actually thought of a movie called Krisha, which came out maybe 7-8 years ago, directed by Trey Edward Schultz. There's a similar idea where it was shot, on almost nothing. This guy just shot with his family members. He shot in the house that he lived in, and yet out of that came something really, really personal and special. And I couldn't decide if I found the film more interesting or the story behind it more interesting. But here, it's easily no contest. The story behind it is infinitely more interesting than the actual material. At first, I really, really liked it. I know it's very muffled, and that's all part of the intent because, we need that dichotomy between when we have the jump scares and all of that. The sound there shoots up quite dramatically, so I'm sure that like in a movie theater, maybe it would be a little bit more interesting, but yeah, like for me, it just all felt very, very expected. And I don't know, I merely felt manipulated by all of the jump scare tactics here. And I say I was manipulated, but poorly, because, I didn't bat an eye at all watching this movie. And then once the climax happens, there's just, again, not enough to break up the atmosphere of the film because we haven't taken the film into any new direction. And because of that, there's this feeling of aimlessness, I think, in the second half of it, so far as finding ways to bring out the tension where it feels organic, where we can feel the emotions of the characters. But I found that they were doing like a lot of looping of images and sound effects and special effects as well. And so a lot of the story starts to get very muddled. And I found myself so uninterested that I just kind of let go of the very basic concepts. And I know a lot of it has to do with budget constraints and all of that. It just felt still that there's no way to reframe the action. As things get more immersive, as things get more intense, we should be able to move a little bit more. There just should be some sort of something to break up the monotony of what's going on in the film. But yet I didn't care, and I felt completely lost by the end of it. Narratively, tonally, all of that, it starts to feel a little bit chaotic, and it kind of reminded me of somebody who's about to give a presentation in like a class or something, but they didn't do the assignment, so they just go up there and they just talk, and they're just bullshitting us the entire time. And maybe some people find that entertaining, whatever. I personally just don't buy into it. And I don't think that he's an untalented person, certainly not. He's very observant. Naturally, he is an artist. I just think there's a lot of self-seriousness going on here. I think, a great vocabulary and knowledge of cinema, experimental film in particular, I don't think that necessarily makes you great. I don't think that necessarily makes you deep. And I do think that this guy has a really great short film in him, and maybe he could submit and, win some awards and such. I think if he finds the right angle and hones in on something a little bit more personal, I think he can really excel. I'm just not sure, at least for me, that he's proven himself as somebody who could make feature-length films yet. I just see a lot of stray branches to the tree, and there's no firm core, there's nothing rooted in the earth or anything like that, and I can't really get behind it. And I wanted to like it, as I said, because this type of thing is up my alley, the soporific type of movie. But also I encourage movies like this, especially like these small projects that kind of go under the radar and somehow they get really popular, kind of like a cult status sort of thing. Anything that is bold and that is trying to take a genre that we see a million times and trying to do something different, I have to applaud them for that, applaud them for the creativity, all about that. So, this does have that going for it, but again, it's just not nearly enough for me. I think there are a million more interesting horror films to see. I wouldn't waste your time with this one. I think if you're gonna watch anything, maybe just go on the guy's YouTube channel and get a sense of some of his short films. I think that gives you, plenty that you need to know for this. But yeah, I am kind of perplexed by the people who do say that this is one of the more terrifying movies they've ever seen. I have no idea why you would feel that way. So if you are one of those people, please tell me in the comments why you feel that way. But for everybody else who hasn't seen it, I personally can't quite recommend it. But that is the review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that's something that you're interested in, you can go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are wonderful guys. Thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you're interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.